Yay! I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, okay.
Being on this side of the cameras.
I know.
New, but it's great.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm going to start,
Okay,
no small talk
No.
with something that we need to know about you, like the earliest memory that we need to know about you to understand who's sitting in front of us today.
Well, it depends on how long you have.
Okay. We have all the time in the world.
Yeah, I mean, earliest days that I feel like speak to who I am now and how I got here is I grew up in a really small town in New Hampshire, and I feel like much of my childhood was spent in the woods.
Yeah.
Just like a very free-spirited, kind of independent, probably felt like unconventional lifestyle, like growing up as a kid. My parents decided to homeschool me and my 3 siblings, and so we had just a lot of independence growing up to like explore and play and just discover the world around us. And I think that the more I think about my childhood, the more like that becomes a formative piece of who I am today.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's always been just kind of a big inspiration for me, and I think it has sort of stayed with me, like all the places I've moved and lived up till now.
That's so fun.
You know.
Okay, so you said you grew up in the woods.
In the woods. Well, playing a lot in the woods.
Yes.
Very rural, small town, New Hampshire.
Yeah. And because, like, I also grew up in a small town.
Okay.
And so I totally am with you with, like, just, like, the differences between being there versus being in a city. What are some things that you feel like, formed you and shaped you versus how it feels now to live in Boston?
Yeah, so I think that... it's cliche, but they say, you can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl.
Yeah.
And I think being in a city now has just showed me that, like, how much I miss being in the country. And I think when I was in the country, I thought, no, I want to be, like, where the people are. It was kind of, like, Little Mermaid moment of, like, get me on shore. And so, yeah, there's this interesting tension of, like, I love being with people. I love the excitement, I love the opportunities of the city, I love the kind of inspiration it gives me, but I also always feel like I crave solitude all of the time, and I think that I've had to learn how to like schedule that into my lifestyle more, because we don't live in a quiet place. No. It's not as busy as some cities, which I think is great, but we don't live in a quiet place, and so just learning to like value that a lot more.
Yeah. And you mentioned that those formative years, the more and more you think about it, shaped you today.
Yeah.
How so?
So I think it shaped me by really observing the world around me, paying attention to details, noticing pockets of like beauty and wonder and stillness in certain corners. Artistically, I think it's taught me to look at light a lot differently, because I've seen just how much light changes all of the time. And I mean, that influences me as a photographer, but it's just different in the city. Light is different in the city than it is in the woods, like everywhere you go. So
totally different, like how it's being like filtered, I guess, through either trees or buildings. More so blocked by buildings than filtered.
Yes, it's never the same. So
that's all so beautiful. And now I'm starting to think maybe I'm not so curious with like the magic and the mundane thing, because I've always felt like I've had a special eye tuned to like these little moments, and I wonder if it's a function of like growing up on a countryside and less so, but also you're an artist, so I don't know, we'll figure it out.
Right, I don't know, I feel like it's the distraction element, right, where we're like, you're less distracted in the country, so you have to just kind of sit there with what you have. And the city is so overstimulating. It took me a long time to adjust to the stimulation of the city, and now it's like kind of pulling back to how do we observe those small mundane moments in the stimulation. So similar but different.
Okay, well, bring us up to today. Like, I know what you do, but people might not know what you do, so tell me.
So I mean, I work primarily as a commercial and brand photographer. I have spent most of my career running from the idea of being a photographer, and I never thought I would end up here.
Yeah.
Here we are. So, yeah, there's, I think, I mean, I can tell you, like, the whole story.
Tell us the whole
Okay.
story. We want to know it all.
Okay. So I never thought I would be a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
I was never someone that had like a camera when she was like 5 years old and like fell in love with pictures. I actually hated photos when I was little. My mom always struggled to get me to like smile in photos. Like it was a whole thing. Hated photos. And then when I was, I think 15 or 16, I picked up my first little like point and shoot, like Canon cyber shot, you know, like they were really cool. Everyone was like, just take that, you know, everyone had these like tiny little digital cameras, and I was pretty enamored with like the tech aspect of it, the fact that it was digital. And so I started taking a few photos then, but I didn't get my first real camera, my first DSLR, until I was 19 years old. Because a couple friends from high school were like, you should totally just try it. Yeah. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I picked up a camera when I was 19, you know, but then I studied English in college. I worked in marketing for a couple years. I started taking photos on the side and on the summers between semesters, but never really saw a path forward with photography. And yeah, so then when I graduated and started working in marketing, I just kind of kept that very part-time. But people kept asking, you know, like, hey, like, can you photograph my kid's birthday party or like do engagement photos or start shooting weddings? And so kind of like played the game of like, just make this a good side hustle. But it's not like the it thing. And then after a while, I thought that I really cared a lot more about the design aspect of things. So I was like, forget marketing, I'm gonna go study UX design. And that's what brought me to Boston like about 4 years ago, because I did UX as like a program here and I really loved it. And then when I finished the program, I was like, I don't want to work in tech and I don't want to work for corporate tech. So I just took photography and was like, if I'm going to do all of this together, I think it's going to have to be in the brand world. So that's sort of the story of how I landed up here now. But a lot of people tell you, you know, you can't make it as a photographer if you unless you do weddings full time. So that was like a narrative that I heard over and over again. So it took a lot of just reorienting that way of thinking to be like, actually, you know, businesses need good imagery all the time. It doesn't have to be really stiff and corporate looking and just like, you know, hands on hips and like just like what you see on like for like a real estate billboard. Even though I have photographed a real estate billboard, I've been there. So it's there's a new way of thinking about it. So I was like, how do I take, you know, what I care about with design thinking and storytelling and the cinematic side of it and apply that to the brand world? So that's so here we are.
There's so many interesting little nuggets that you dropped in there, and I'm going to go through all of them. I know, no pressure, but I want to just unpack a little bit more. So like because it seems like people just kept telling you and pulling this thing out of you and being like, hey, like, you should take pictures. Why? Because it's not a common thing for people to say, be like, you look like you'd be a good photographer. Was there something about you?
I don't know if there was anything about me. I think I was just so particular in the type of photos that I took. And I think all artists struggle with that like perfectionistic side of themselves, and so I sort of just pushed that into my photography a lot, and that came through, and I think people saw that, you know, attention to story, attention to detail.
And this was with like your point and shoot, like
or like my DSLR. I was like, I don't I think you know, everyone starts out like really cringe artist, and I don't think there was anything particularly unique. I think just like over time you just develop your voice and your style, you get better, and then people start paying attention to it.
Wow. Okay. And then why, when you were younger, did you not like being in front of the camera?
Oh man. You know, I actually think it's because I was also a perfectionist when I was really little, and I just maybe felt annoyed at how the photos were being taken. I just didn't know how to articulate it or care about it. And so I didn't, I think my artistic self was really underdeveloped when I was a kid.
As it should be. Like, you're not going to be born with it.
But even, my sense of, like, creativity, I think, wasn't as, it wasn't something that I thought about a lot. I cared a lot more about, like, stories and writing and kind of this, like, an academic side of things when I was growing up. So the artist side came a lot later, like, making.
Yeah. And do you think that, like, maybe pushed you, because, like, you're not really wanting to be in front of the camera, you were getting, like, a little irritated with how the pictures were being taken. Do you think there was, like, just something in you where it's like, no, I am an image maker, like, I'm not necessarily, like, this is not my vibe, is to be on this side and, like, relinquish control, I guess.
Some of that was definitely there. Looking back, for sure.
Like, there's an instinct in you. And then you mentioned how people were, you know, encouraging you maybe to go into weddings and, you know, maybe, like, trying to impose these limiting beliefs, like, where the only way to make money on this is doing weddings. Why didn't you want to go into that, and how did you kind of overcome that pressure?
So it's interesting because, like, the things that we like change over time. So when I started shooting weddings, I was like, this is so cool. Like, I'm photographing a wedding. Like, it's crazy that these people trust me, who I don't really know, to, like, capture, like, a really important day of their life. And I think I would never want to, like, look back on that kind of era of my photography life as something that wasn't, like, so essential to even being a brand photographer now. So when I started shooting couples, I really did enjoy that interpersonal element. And I think some of the storytelling that came from that really trained me how to, like, view a story too, because like, weddings are big stories. So kind of forgot what your question was around this. But I think what drew me, like, away from weddings at the end was, like, I felt like it actually took a little too much emotionally from me. I got so invested in the story of the couple and the families that I was photographing that, like, each wedding I would edit just felt like this massive, like, drain in some ways. And I knew, like, I was never a wedding photographer where, you know, people were, like, other wedding photographers I know take, like, 30 weddings a year, you know, like, they have totally booked out schedules of weddings. I maxed out at, like, 15 maybe a year. And that was, it just felt like way too much draining creative energy. And I liked the stuff that I made, but it wasn't generative or rejuvenating for me at all. And so a lot of that was the art side, but it was mostly the, like, logistics, interpersonal side of things. So that's kind of what I was so envisioning a future, right? Of, like, this is going to be the rest of my life was just not something I wanted to do with photography at all.
And it sounds like you're the type of person who pours a lot of your heart and soul into your work, and I could see how that could get, you know, difficult if it's such a, like, charged event where it's like, okay, these people are entrusting me with, like, this one moment.
Absolutely. And, like, some photographers are able to just really compartmentalize their work and shoot tons of events and weddings, and it's like they're not personally engaged with the content that they're making. They have this great ability to just do their work well and keep their kind of whole, like, heart out of it in some in, like, a good way. I don't mean that in, like, a negative way. But I just knew my limits, and I was like, that's not how I operate my best kind of work. So.
That makes perfect sense. And then, but you were able to make that jump. Tell us about that transition, but to, like, away from weddings, because then your portfolio is essentially, like, you had to start again, and you're having these voices in your head, like, this is the only way you can make money. So, like,
I don't really know kind of how the transition happened, except that I started shooting for more businesses as on the side of weddings. So weddings became the on the side thing. And then the extra on the side thing was shooting for businesses and brands and small business owners and, like, influencer, like, people who had personal brands. So as that started building, I would try to just like allocate more time to the brand side of things. And then kind of the pandemic happened around the same time, and because of that there was a lot of delays in weddings, and so like weddings got pushed back a year or even 2, and that kept me in the game a lot longer than maybe I wanted to, but it actually gave me a lot of time to focus on building out a good system for brand photography.
Right.
So kind of credit the pandemic for that, like extra time to like reflect and evaluate and think through how I want to move forward with photography. Yeah.
It's like the grand reset.
Yes, the grand reset
for all
everyone.
of us. Yeah. And I'm happy to hear that, you know, there was fruitful aspects of it. It's always like such a dicey relationship, because I also credit the pandemic for a lot of my business growth, but then it's difficult. So it's like people were dying, you know, but it was also, you know, there was good and bad, as there is to everything in life. Okay, so I know I keep like right, such a huge reset. So I want to drill in for anyone who might be like hearing this conversation. It's like, but how did she do this? Like, how did you go from, you know, you studied English and marketing, and then you just started a business, and then all of a sudden you had 15 weddings a year, and like tell us about the like logistics and like the marketing and the finding clients and that nitty gritty.
Okay, so the nitty gritty, the marketing. So there's a bunch of things. So the businesses, so there was a lot of prospecting involved. So I first had to like build out an offer. And I had a lot of help with this because there's someone in my life who is very like business savvy, marketing savvy. Just like I have like basically like a business mentor, like coach. And
so important.
It's so important. Everybody needs one. But we were able to like build out an offer for brand photography specifically, and I had to really work on narrowing down like who are the types of businesses I want to work for, what kind of businesses are they, who are the people I want to work for. So we definitely just revamped the whole website to have a streamlined offer, which was really, really important. That was more effective than I thought it would be, actually. You should always trust your business coaches. So that was really effective because as businesses were searching for me on Instagram and on Google, they were able to see that I was speaking directly to them from my copy and my offer, like on my website. So that's one side of things. The other side of things was just a lot of prospecting I did. I reached out to a ton of businesses. I did so many shoots for free to build my portfolio. And then it's sort of like the business has a business friend, that referrals, word of mouth kind of came in. But the nurture sequence is essential to like building a business. And sometimes it took me a couple years from like the start of a conversation with a company to actually shooting for them. So a lot of time and effort. But that's sort of how things started rolling. And then as the more I photographed, the more referrals came in too. So kind of a combination of everything.
And so you were shooting for free at the beginning. And those people were referring you to other people. How did you make that jump from shooting for free, but then making sure, how did you do it in a way that was artful and nuanced so that you weren't locked in that world?
I mean, you just make a lot of mistakes. Like, I think there's, you know, you offer something to one business, you shoot maybe for free, you build your portfolio, a different business reach out, you charge them a little money, and you build up from there. And a lot of it is coming into like understanding your own value and your like what you're actually offering, and then being confident about that, and then finding sort of the right balance of here's what these businesses want to invest versus here's what they're really looking like, kind of figuring out who are the types of clients that are ready for what I have to offer too. So saying no to lots of projects and then saying yes to a lot too that maybe weren't completely aligned with what I was looking for, but I knew would help with marketing or other portfolio building areas. So just trial and error. Lots of that.
Was there any like agreement with these clients that was like, hey, I'm doing this for you, complimentary, but like don't tell other people? Or were people just like very understanding? That's like, I know you did this for my friend for free, but we get it. Like it's been, you know, a year now, and we're totally happy with paying.
I think I think a lot of it has just been like upfront communication with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, this was in 2020. This is 2022 now. You know, like you can just kind of like up your prices every year, adjust for inflation. It's important.
Yeah.
So I think, there hasn't been too much trouble, I think, in those conversations. And if they're not interested, they just say they're not interested. And you can either like lower your price at that point, or you can just find someone new. So,
Yeah. And that's like, I feel like a lot of stuff you're saying is just like easy peasy, but that's really impressive. Yeah. Like just like that mindset and that comfort with your own self and your own skill set to be able to be like, I'll just find someone new, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think that's like a testament to like, I don't know, you as a business person, and also like how blessed that you've been to be able to like build out these clients and things like that. Because I can imagine that there's people out there who are like, okay, but like where's the someone new coming from, and like all these things. So tell us a little bit about your prospecting. Like how do you go about just like reaching out to a business, and what does that 1 or 2 years look like when you're nurturing this relationship?
So the prospecting is interesting because a lot of it is about visibility, brand awareness, which is such a weird term.
I'm with you.
It's like
speaking my language.
So ridiculous. But I think a lot of it is like making a connection with someone, and I would do this on Instagram or LinkedIn, or I would just email them. And a lot of it is just approaching them very as a human, being like, hey, you're a small business in town. I live in the same town. I love what you're doing. I'm a photographer, you know, and then if depending on like how I want to kind of like give them an offer, I can just talk through like my process, or just be like, I want to come down and like shoot, you know, your work, your service, your product, your storefront, like it's amazing, and build from there. It really depends. Like the prospecting is all very different. But there's you prospect a lot and there's not a lot of replies, but people will reply. Like, if you keep at it, people will reply, as long as like you're not cringy or like crazy with the cold DMs. So that, I think that was a big part of my start, with getting new clients, more work, and then a lot of it has turned into referrals now. But I don't think the prospecting ever goes away, because I think as I work through the types of businesses I want to work more with, you know, I have to like change directions on getting into those industries. So, that whole question. Cut that out, guys. No, that's fine.
Okay. Wait,
No, it's fine. I don't have like a good answer for you, because I think I just don't know like how it all happens.
Well, I feel like that's what I'm trying to unpack a little bit, because it's like, not because you're not answering the question well, but I'm just thinking like that is the issue, right? Like it's for so many service-based businesses, it's like, how do you find clients? And everyone's like, you just need to be better at generating leads. It's like, how? And so I think just like hearing different, which is a big point of like why I'm doing these interviews, it's like finding people who have been succeeding and hearing all the different ways they got there, so that we can start to like pull common threads. It's like, oh, this is maybe not the formula, but you know, like this is how this happens for people, and it can happen for you too. You know? So
no, I think actually something that is really helpful maybe for photographers is that in the branding world, you're never just working solo. Like you're working with brand managers, you're working with brand designers, you're working with art directors, and so actually those are the people you need to be connecting with. So that's something I had to learn from, okay, there's a small business owner over here, which is more like one-to-one, but then if you want really big shoots, you have to work with the team. And the team, there's many people sitting around that table, right? Like, so it's about finding someone who is sitting at that table, making a connection with them, and kind of nurturing that relationship. So you have to know like who you're asking.
No,
and know what you're offering.
I mean, it's the reverse engineering too, because I know that that's been a big part too of my business growth, is knowing and understanding like who actually goes into these decision-making processes, because when you are working with small businesses, it's like, yeah, you need to reach the founder and they're who's going to be making the decisions. But as you start to grow and scale, usually in order to make that next step, exactly like you said, you're probably never going to reach the founder or CEO of this like giant 7-figure, 8-figure corporation, but you might be able to connect with the art director who's actually the one who's hiring photographers or designers, right? And so knowing and being strategic with that, and then knowing to make those connections and go to the places where those people are, or send them a LinkedIn message. Like, what's the harm? Even if 9 out of 10 of them don't reply, you only need one to reply. Like, and it's just putting yourself out there over and over again.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how it works. Yeah.
And then tell me about the nurture process, because you use that word a few times, nurturing. What does that look like for you? Do you just ping them every once in a while, or?
So I'll tell you what it means, like, ideally, and, like, I don't do anything that's ideal in the situation, but, like, having an email newsletter, right? Like, staying top of mind. And, like, this is something we've talked about before, is staying top of mind for businesses, for those key people sitting around those tables. Staying top of mind, it's checking in with them. It's simply asking for more work sometimes. There have been businesses I worked for where I'll just every quarter reach out and be like, hey, is there any new projects you're working on? Sometimes they just forget, you know, they're so busy and involved in the brand that they forget, you know, maybe all about you, which is totally understandable. So staying top of mind as best as possible, staying visible, posting a lot, sending messages. There's a way to do it in a very, like, I think gracious and sort of humane way, where when I talk about, like, a nurture sequence for people, I don't mean to, like, treat them as, like, okay, we're these little, like, algorithms floating around trying to, like, capture this person, which is, you know, I mean,
can feel that way.
It can feel that way. A lot of language around photography is very violent too, which is funny. But there's, like, this, so there's this sense of just really trying to understand, like, show them, like, how you can help tell their stories that they're telling, right, at the business, and how you can help them. A lot of it's, how can I help you? That's very much the approach. So.
I think that that's a really nice approach. And I think if you are focused in on, serving them first and trying to actually figure out genuinely how you can help them, and, like, that will come through in your messages and in your nurturing, and it won't feel like you drop them into some funnel or pipeline that you, like, end goal sale, you know? And a lot of the language, like you said, around business and marketing and things like that can be like that. Like, it's like, find the target consumer, put them in your pipeline. And, like, it's all these things, which, you know, like, there's use for those things. And I think it's useful to understand that first before you go and shatter it, you know? But when it comes, like, I always think more of, like, taking people through a journey or inviting them into, like, a journey that they can at any point in time walk out of, or stop, or take a pause and things like that, rather than trying to funnel them through a pipeline. I don't like the terminology around it, even though that's, like, what is happening. But a lot of it is just, you have to get on the phone with them and talk to them. Just have a real conversation with them, and even just being like, hey, I don't think we are a good fit. You know, like, being honest about, I think what you're looking for is not something I can give you. Here are other people that can help you. I think that's very much the mentality around nurturing a good business relationship. Totally agree. Worked on me. You took beautiful photos of me and my phone. It was awesome. Yes. Okay. I just want to ask y'all, how are we doing for, like, battery charges and stuff? Everything good?
Everything's good. I do have 35 minutes left in storage.
Great. Sorry, completely off script.
I know.
But where are we? I know. But I just wanted to talk, and I want to see. I feel like there's so much interesting stuff.
So much.
I might just skip some of this because we're past your childhood.
My story about, like, how I got, like, the first time I picked up a camera, and I told that whole story.
Okay, you told it. Okay, perfect. Well, I think that we're in a good place then.
Okay.
Cool. Cool. So, you describe yourself as an image bearer and an image maker. Those are really beautiful words. What do they mean to you in particular?
This is, like, my favorite thing to talk about.
So,
like, as a Christian, like, I believe every person is made in the image of God. And so because like you and I are made in the image of God, we have this capacity to create the way like God has this, you know, he is the creator. And so I think a lot of my, I think about being an image bearer, bearing God's image and then making images is interesting to think about, because I don't think images are actually taken. I think they're made. And the idea of like taking an image is sort of like, here's this scene outside of yourself and you're just taking it. I think we have this capacity to make an image, to actually create, to build, to reflect our capacity to create that we have because we are made in God's image. So those words are kind of like a benchmark for me when I think about what it means to make a photograph. I remember that like I've been given this capacity to create because I've been created, and that can stem forth and sort of radiate all of the aspects of my life. And I think it comes through in creativity, especially with people. So that's kind of what I mean by those words.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I've never thought of that, like the difference between taking an image and making an image. And I think that's like a really important and interesting distinction. Do you think that there's ever a world where like maybe a point in your life where you were just quote taking images, or do you think just like everyone's making images instinctively?
Yeah, and I think the difference is very much right, the artist's intention. So what kind of turns people from like, or what, how do I say this? I think all people have this capacity to create, but not everyone is a working artist. And the difference is that the working artist has this intention behind it, where we are building a scene versus kind of like floating through, like the art appreciators versus like those who are building a world building, storytelling, the intention behind that. So it's a very fine line, I think, between those who are creative, which I think is a message everyone needs to hear. Like everybody has this capacity to be creative, and everyone is creative in no matter what field that they work in. But for those who design things, who paint things, who photograph things, who build things, like we have this intention behind it where we are making a small world, like inside the world. So the more I think about world building in photography, the more art I produce. Yeah. So that's how I see it together. Yeah.
I love that so much. Okay. And so this is like a big thing for you, is like your faith and like, integrating that in. How do you feel like that's changed the way that you do business? And like we hear how it has changed the way that you create and the artistic side of it. But what about like all the other stuff that we just talked about, the nitty gritty, you know?
I think it's so faith is like the biggest part of my life, and it just goes with me everywhere. And so where there are ways that I can live that out through business, through relationships with people, the art that I make itself, it's all impacted. I think, you know, a big part of being a believer is valuing like a love for God and for neighbor above all. And so if there are situations that I'm in where I feel like people are using other people, or it's a business whose beliefs like I can't really get on board with, I will steer clear of those things, or I will try to be like a presence in those places where I'm able to just love my neighbor well. And along with the art making, I think most of my art making does the talking for itself. Like I'm not someone that like goes in and like talks about my faith in like every single shoot or like context, but you know, I do pray before all of my shoots, and I think that's helpful for me to think about, okay, like I'm going to be working with this team of people today. Like, how do I serve them well? Like, how do I honor God in my actions and my words and my presence? So that's, a lot of it is very personal about how it impacts my relationships with others on the job. And then the art itself is just like we talked about, that creativity, looking at beauty, goodness, and truth, like in what I'm making, I think comes from God. And so I'm trying to pay attention to that with what I'm shooting and what I'm seeing, that image in another person that's in front of me.
I love that so much. And I think it shows. I think that there is a special something. And I had no idea. So this is like my thing.
Right.
Like, not because of anything you're doing or anything like that, but it's like so many times that this has happened in my career where I've hired or worked with a photographer or videographer or something, and then just to find out after that they're Christians, I'm like, that's why, like, it's like, I feel like that's why I'm drawn to this work, because there's like just something different or something about your energy or something like that that attracts me. And that's on me for not reading your bio that closely. Because I was like,
I had that same impression about you too, and I was kind of like,
there's something.
I feel like same wavelength.
Yeah, it was my favorite texting. I was like, are you a Christian? Yes. Okay, so, well, I actually want to skip that question because I think you answered it.
Which question?
The community, unless you want to answer it. Okay, never mind. So,
that's a good question.
What role has community played in your career?
Okay. It's been such a journey with community. So I'll try to keep it like concise, but I think that there has been different types of community like all throughout the changing of my photography journey. So when I was starting out, I had some really wonderful, like, I really credit being a photographer just to two of my high school friends who really gave me that freedom to just play. And that's really all I needed, was just those two people feeding into that story of like, you just take, like, it doesn't matter, like, don't be a perfectionist, just take photos. And then I think that, I come from like a very entrepreneurial family in some degree, and so I didn't have this like family pressure of like, you have to like get a certain type of career, have a certain job. So they've been just very super chill about the whole, oh great, you want to take photos and try to make that work, sure. So that's definitely been a big support, and that's something that I realize over and over again, a lot of creative entrepreneurs do not have that support, like from their core family, from where they started. And so that's something that I definitely take for granted. And then, shooting weddings, I had a couple of really good wedding photographer friends that just were always a text away, if we needed to chat about, logistics or difficulty, or if we had questions for each other. A lot of that journey, though, I felt like I operated my art in solitude, or pretty much closed myself off to a lot of community. I think there was a lot of, growing I needed to do with inviting other people in to just, speak into my work specifically. And I remember sort of toward the end of my wedding photography time, at the end of the year, I would just send a bunch of galleries to different wedding photographers, be like, please give me feedback, like, I need to know, like, is this good, is this not? And that was just a good practice of like getting your art out there in person to people instead of sort of hiding behind like a digital presence. And then which is ironic, right? Because the digital presence is to everyone, but it's like you hide behind that a lot more than just showing someone in person, like, what do you think? So, and then recently, I think that community has played like the largest role ever in creativity. And maybe like a myth around this is that you need like 12 people in your life to speak. It's like you really only need a small handful of people. And if you're consistent with them, if you're committed to them, they will speak back into your life, and you can really help each other. So I have a few people in my life who like, we are in regular talks with about like, how's business going? How's work going? What are our goals for this month? What kind of projects do we have coming up? So I think it's just so essential to, and I'm sure you feel this too as a creative entrepreneur, like you need people around you who are not working the normal like 9-to-5 jobs that can tell you you're not going insane. So that's definitely, that's been, such a huge part of my experience.
And what would you say to the type of person who might not have the type of family that you do? Like, what's something your parents gave you that made you feel free to jump and take on this type of career that maybe you could say to someone who hasn't gotten to hear that?
I mean, I think it comes down to like what they're ultimately valuing. And you know, this is not at all an endorsement of like, forget your family, live your passion, do your thing. Like, no, it's kind of, a lot of it is showing your family that there are, like, first, the economy we live in, you can make a living out of doing pretty much anything. So there's like, you can kind of approach them and their mentality of like, you need a specific, you know, college degree and then a specific type of job, or what does stability look like? And you can be like, well, look at all the people with stable jobs that lost their jobs in the pandemic. Like the world we live in is constantly changing. Job security is a little bit of a myth when we think about building usable tools and skills that we can use across the board. I think creative entrepreneurs have a huge advantage in that sense because we're constantly building skills. And I would just encourage them to think through, like, you know, do you want to end up in a job doing something that you're not excited about, but you feel maybe relatively stable in, versus taking that, like, jump, that risk of doing something you love and care about that could have impact, or maybe even, like, spiritually you feel called to. Like, there's a deeper sense of calling toward, like, an artistic lifestyle, or it doesn't even have to be art. It can be branching out on your own in whatever capacity. But yeah, I would just encourage really, like, thinking through the priorities of, like, what are you valuing? And I think artists get a lot of flack for not, you know, feeding into these Western ideals of, like, what's productive, what's efficient in our society, what makes the most sense. It's like, we just make art. Like, it doesn't have a lot of, like, usability in a way, which is, like, not a hot take for Boston, because Boston is all about usability and productivity and efficiency. But there's, like, people need beauty in the world, and they need to see, they need the hope that comes from that, you know? I think, like, it's Van Gogh that talks about, like, how art has this capacity to, like, heal people. And that's really needed, I think, in our world of just hyper-driven, financial-driven, you know, success-oriented, like, productivity. That's my big rant about Boston.
I'm with you. And I think that beauty really is essential, and art is essential to the human experience. And as much as we can say that there's no tangible utility to art or photography or design, I don't know. I'm not sure. I feel like I'd push back on that a little bit, right? Where it's like,
it depends on the project, because it definitely has usability.
It has usability, and it's like, it's just so, like, I think anybody who's ever gotten married and hired a photographer would say that the photos were essential, right? And so I think that, like, we all provide different types of value to the world, and there's people who do things that it's like, we would literally die without doctors, and you know, and we would not be able to do a thing without, like, people who are doing construction and stuff like that, but we would be probably stealing so much joy from ourselves without artists, right? And so there's just, like, you know, it's like, we all work towards creating a beautiful world, and we all have different roles, and like, there's no way that we could survive without one another. So I think that your role is absolutely essential, even if it doesn't have the same utility as somebody who's, like, making, I don't know, whatever, chairs. I don't know.
I think artists understand, like, the importance of it, but I think people who are afraid to venture forth or don't have that support often feel like they need to fit into the mold of, like, something is clearly useful, something is clearly, like, hobby or just for enjoyment, and it's like, that is a sad divide.
No, I'm with you. That is a big part of it. It's just, like, the narrative that it's a hobby, that it's, like, photography, especially since there's so many hobbyist photographers, and so it can be difficult to be like, no, that's not the world I'm in. I've surpassed this into, you know.
It's different.
It's absolutely different. Okay, so you've worked with some really major brands, especially in the food and beverage space. How did you get into these industries? Was this the prospecting? How did you get seats at these tables?
Yeah, so it's everything we talked about with prospecting. I think I had to realize there's a lot of people at the table. And who at the table who do you need to, like, get to know? So it's what we talked about, like, the art directors, the brand designers, the stylists, like, whoever is the decision maker for photography. Those are the people to get to nurture relationship with.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was it like? Like, how did it start to influence your, like, perception, like, your self-perception as a creative when you started to work with bigger names and companies?
Yeah. I'm really grateful you're asking this question, because I think this is something that I don't give myself a lot of time to think about, because I don't know what it is. Either, like, I'm too scared to think about it, or I just, I don't quite know how to, like, process it. So, I mean, I just remember, like, I'll give you, like, 2 examples of, like, really, like, cool moments where I felt like, oh, what does this say about me, like, as a creator? So, like, several years ago, I was photographing a charity event, and, like, Rob Gronkowski was there, and it was, like, just a very, like, photography-wise, it was a very simple event in the sense, but there was just, like, some high-profile people there, and it was, really fun, and I didn't think a lot about it until, like, a couple days later, the event coordinator texted me and was like, hey, like, he just posted all your photos on Instagram, and it was just, like, this whole big deal, and I remember thinking to myself, like, whoa, like, that's a lot of people, like, and I don't care about football, and then there's, like, this whole other, like, world of, like, this is, like, a really cool, like, fun one-time influencer moment, right? So I had, like, that experience several years ago, and I just thought, oh, like, whatever, like, kind of like a whole, didn't pay a lot of attention to it, and then, like, last year, another moment that it kind of hit me that this was sort of a bigger deal is when one of the, like, PR people at, like, Lindt Chocolate reached out to me and was like, hey, like, the fall campaign that we photographed, like, what is the word for this? Like, storefront windows in many CVS's in New York City are all, like, hanging your photos, right? And it was just, like, this moment of, like, whoa, that's really cool and different. And I actually thought those photos were kind of, like, mediocre in some ways, right? But I think your question about, like, the self-perception as, like, a creative is, I really realize with these bigger brands, like, it is the product of so many people's work. Like, I was there, yes, taking the photo, but there were stylists there. There was the brand manager there. There was people who have, like, poured into the art direction of how a shoot should go. And so when I look at kind of that photo, like, hanging in a window somewhere, I'm like, this is not just my work. This is so many people's work. And I just kind of was there to do my small part in the larger work. So it feels like sort of just the page in a whole book when I look at those, like, kind of bigger opportunities and shoots. But it's a lot of it just makes me feel like, oh, I have to, like, keep producing good work, right. And it doesn't really make me, like, feel, like, too different or too, I don't know. If anything, it scares me more than it makes me feel like, yeehaw, like, that's up there. So, I don't know. It's like it's a very tricky feeling.
Yeah.
That
is so funny. And so, like, you've oscillated from working with, like, Lindt Chocolate to, like, little old me. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Like, do you still pursue these larger projects? Or is that where you squarely want to be? Or would you like to always have one foot in working with smaller companies?
The food and beverage space is not a space where I'm particularly, like, that needs to become my main thing. I love portrait work, portrait lifestyle work. So, I mean, working with chocolate is great. The product just stays where you put it. It's very, very detailed, very styled work. And I get to work with, like, cool people who are very good at their job, like, styling. But those are all, one-off campaigns. Lindt works with a ton of photographers doing lots of things. So I love working with individuals, small businesses. Like, a lot of my passion comes through in that cinematic portrait work, which is squarely my lane. So I enjoy shoots, like, with you as much as I do with random chocolate.
So you said that's squarely your lane. Is that what really sets your heart on fire? Is like the portrait work and things like that? Yeah,
it's telling the story of other entrepreneurs who, a lot of them are creative, who have, like, that vision and bringing that to life for them. And it's the photography side of it, but it's that kind of creative consulting. It's of the visual brand of another business.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I love that. And is there something that you would have done differently throughout your professional journey if you were able to like go back and embed all the knowledge of now to a past self?
I think, I don't know, because everything that's happened has made me who I am. So I don't know if there's anything I would do particularly different. Part of me wishes I didn't spend so long putting off being a photographer, just trying lots of different things throughout college and post-college to, it took me a while to mentally get there, being like, okay, like I am going to be a photographer. So I think that process took its time. It needed to take its time. It was like a formative time, but other than that, there isn't something I don't think I would have done differently. Maybe listen to my business mentor more. Listen to them if they're good.
Yeah. Is there something that they told you that you didn't do and you're like, oh, that could have saved me time or money or whatever?
Well, speaking of maybe like bad advice or like limiting beliefs, right? I think just the idea of prospecting, I think in my head I was like, well, if you're just good enough at your craft, brands will find you.
The constant lie.
They won't. And you're not, and I think too, it's like, I'm really not, I mean this objectively, I am not the best photographer, like 100%. Like there are so many good and amazing brand photographers out there that I look up to and aspire to. Like I am just one of many, and a lot of it is like, no brand is going to come find me unless I like get in their lane of visibility. And so I think I thought to myself, just practice hard enough, do enough styled shoots, do enough like work, and then magically like they will flock. They will not flock. Not anymore. I don't know if that was ever a thing, but they won't. So just being practical, I guess, about it.
Maybe
really
like 50 or 100 years ago that was true, but I feel like someone out there needs to hear that. That's like, they're not coming.
Like, no one's coming. It's like that TED Talk, right? Like, no one is coming. Like, you have to make good work and then put it in front of people. And then even then, a small percentage of them are going to see it and like it. But that's the life we choose.
And I would argue that the most creative people are also innovating and creating in the way that they market and the way they put themselves out there and things like that. And people, like you said, it's like such a strange lie that we're like, well, if you're just good, they'll just come, and I just need to keep sharpening my craft. And absolutely keep sharpening your craft. But however, like all this business boring stuff, depending on who you are and what you're interested in, is absolutely essential. And what good is your art doing to the world if like no one's seeing it, right?
Yeah, that in and of itself is an art form. I think prospecting is. Like a college professor of mine once told me, he said, you don't have to prove that you're better than everyone else. He said, you just have to show that you're good. And the emphasis is on showing that you're good. And there's always going to be some artist that's ahead of us, like all the time, and like as it should be. So I don't know, we all don't need to feel so like sensitive or like threatened like around our art. It's like actually people just, okay, cut out that last part. But I
feel like that's really good. And like, I mean, like that's something that honestly is kind of a freeing idea for me, because there used to be a time where I was like, I need to be the literal best graphic designer in the world. I will never be able to be the best designer in the world. I can be good, I can even be exceptional, but there are like so many millions of people doing similar things, and like there's always going to be someone better. And even if somehow you reach the top 10%, probably somebody else who right now is 8 years old is just training up to be better than you right now.
Exactly.
And so like you said, you just need to be good, you need to be competent, but then even more importantly than that, you need to be able to get yourself in front of people and connect with those people and prove that like they can trust you with their project, and that's it. You don't need to be like the best ever, like better than Anne Leibovitz at photography, So.
Like, it's a way of thinking about work too. Like there is work for everyone. Like there, we can be, our scarcity mindset could say, okay, well there's only one of this type of brand, right? But even those big brands have so many different facets of work. Like I think working with some bigger brands, I've realized they work with so many creatives. They all have different campaigns they're shooting. Like there's plenty of work. And maybe brands would be smart to divvy up their work, right? In a helpful way where they are bringing creatives on to tell unique stories, which I think is sort of the direction businesses are going.
Yeah, but so many. And I think that's a pretty important thing that you mentioned too, when you were mentioning about Lindt, how they work with so many photographers.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people, especially if they're just starting out in the creative industry, they think like these giant companies have like 4 photographers or just creatives in each field that they work with. Usually it's like hundreds, and there's just like infinite amount of projects, like small campaigns to things like that. And so it's like, it's not easy. I don't want to like completely take away all the credit, but it's easier than one might think. It's not like the CEO of Nike needs to know your name in order to have Nike as a client. Maybe just like a regional manager who is in charge of creative needs to be interested enough to hire you on with a campaign, and then those things can grow, right? So some affirmations out there for people.
Don't be scared by the big names.
And I mean, this is kind of a good transition into my next thought here. Do you ever experience imposter syndrome?
Oh yes, all the time. I think it is the right of every creative to experience imposter syndrome. And a lot of it stems from a place of insecurity about, like, I'm trying to people please too much and comparing myself to others, or I've just spent too much time on social media and I'm in like the spiraling drain of like, my work is terrible, all of that. And so imposter syndrome is a very normal cycle, I think, of the process. But what has really helped with it, and I think this is something I'm recognizing more in my own work, is that I had a conversation with a friend like last year, and she was really confused by the concept of imposter syndrome because she said you can't feel like an imposter about something that you like. And I really I've been thinking about this for like a year. When there's no pressure to make anything, we just know what we like. Like we like lavender, we like Taylor Swift, or like some people love pumpkin spice lattes or not, like you just know what you like, and you don't feel insecure about what you like at all. Like we don't think about it. It's not something we need to feel self-conscious about. And so if we're making work that we like and we're confident in what we're making, like there's imposter syndrome doesn't really have a place for us. And the times that I have felt most insecure about my work, it's usually because I'm doing work that I'm not enjoying. And so that's something I'm trying to like pay attention to as like a thread in my life. Like, where am I feeling insecure about? Where's this kind of like pure, like innocent love of like making a photograph that I just really love and like, and it doesn't matter who likes it or who hates it or how many likes it gets on Instagram or views it gets on Reel, like whatever it is, it pushes me to think through like what do I really truly love here, and can I be free to just love making that thing even without the noise kind of affirming it or negating it, either way. Because there's, even with imposter syndrome, it doesn't matter if people like really love your work or hate your work. If I'm not happy with what I've made, I will feel insecure about it. Right. Even if the client is like, this was perfect, exactly what we wanted, it's awesome, thank you. Like if I don't like it, I'm still going to feel insecure about it. And so, we can't really feel like an imposter around things that we love.
Wow, that's I've never heard that answer before about imposter syndrome, and I feel like it's a topic people they touch on it a lot for great reason. And that's like that's super interesting. And I'm now like gonna sit for a while and just rethink everything I've ever felt imposter syndrome over and be like, did I like it? Because that self-trust and that ability to prioritize your own opinion over anyone else's is so much easier said than done. But I really do think it's like honestly the key to the key to so much joy and freedom is to just like stop caring so much about other people's opinions and just think like, do I like it? Okay, if I do, then I probably am gonna feel good about it.
Totally. And I feel like faith plays an element in this too, which I feel like is worth saying. Like there's kind of a deeper layer of like, wow, did I feel like in this shoot, like I loved my neighbor well, and perform to the best of my ability with what I was given and gave glory to God for that. And like, that's all, like, how is he seeing me through this? And where does my identity lie in that? So I don't need to feel so insecure, or like my opinion of myself will waver on whether people love it or hate it or how well it performs or not. So deeper layer to it, as always.
It's always that for I am beautifully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows this very well. And I think that psalm for me is always like, wow, like, how on earth could I insult something that was created by a perfect being intentionally, you know?
Yes.
And all these abilities and stuff imbued, like, all I'm doing is taking this beautiful world around me and honing it through my vision and my eye that was, again, created and gifted to me. And
exactly.
Wow. Okay. So what's the most popular, I love this question, I want a hot take. What is the most popular entrepreneurial advice that you disagree with?
I mean, it's definitely what we talked about with brands will just magically find you. You could cut that piece and put it here. Like, that is 100% the most frequent kind of mindset that I've been taught. Another one is just like hustle culture. Like, yes, but also no. Like, there's, I don't think we make our best work when we're working 24/7. It's just, no thanks. So there's a little bit of that pressure in the popular, like, mainstream entrepreneurial advice. I'd like to think people are recovering a sense of balance now, but that wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago. People were talking about being a small business owner, a creative entrepreneur. They were like, you have to spend a whole decade of your life committed to work, do anything it takes, and then you'll, like, make it. It's like, yes and no, right? So that's something that, you know, it's like a lukewarm take for you. It's like the hottest take. Trying to think of something specific photography-wise. Oh, yes, that you need really, really good camera technology. Like, I think you need good cameras, but I did a lot with my, like, Canon Rebel, like, T3 back in the day that I think would shock a lot of people, the things that I photographed on that. Like, you don't need all of the best equipment all of the time. Like, that's definitely, like, the equipment race is a race you will not win, for starters, to stay, like, top of the line. But you really don't need a lot to get going with photography, and a lot of it is about how you see and not the technology that you have. So a lot of people have said, like, oh, I really need, like, a good camera, and I'm always like, well, learn to see first. Like, you don't need the best technology. You can just use your phone, and that will take you so far. So I'm really not a big proponent of, like, get the best technology ever. I think that's my hot take.
Very important. And it is, like, I even get into it, my head with it, and I'm not a photographer. I'm just, like, creating content online. I'm like,
software.
Right? I'm like, I need all the software, or I need the, like, new iPhone so that my reels will, like, be crispy.
Shine.
But it's not, it can't be.
Crispy reels are going out of, like, they're not trendy right now either. We have to, like, make them intentionally blurry.
I know. They were really crispy. Like, how are these people getting such HD? Oh, man. Okay. So, I promise I'll let you go soon. We can bring this to a close. What is something that happened today that you're feeling grateful for?
Ooh, I think my walk over here from the tea was really nice because it's a beautiful day outside. And I was just, feeling grateful, even just for this chance to just talk through some of my thoughts. I mean, I know, like, I'm a very, like, in-person person, and I'd rather just talk with people about ideas around photography and art and faith and business. But I don't talk a lot online. Like, I don't share a lot about this side of my brain. So just feeling grateful for that. For you, basically. And you guys.
There are people behind the camera that cannot be seen right now, which is typically you. But
What about you? Can I ask back?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You absolutely can. Something I'm grateful for this morning. I think similarly, like the sun is shining. It smells like lavender in this room.
Yes.
It's just like the little things. I'm feeling really grateful because I had a great night last night. I was leading a workshop on branding, and then I woke up this morning and got to like do this interview. And sometimes there's just little pockets, like weeks where everything aligns just right, where I'm like, I'm literally living my dream life right now. Like, what is happening?
Yes.
And this felt like one of those weeks. I'm like,
so
this
good.
is exactly what I wanted. So,
Perfect.
I love it. Okay. So, my last question. What is something that you're praying that the next years bring to you?
Wow. I think something that I'm like looking forward to and like praying for is so I feel like I have this one prayer that is like, I want the art and faith community to like keep making excellent work. That's like, I'm very passionate about just Christians doing excellent artwork all over and not being like cliche and full of propaganda. And like we've seen so much bad Christian art, you know, in the last 50-ish years that has been really hard to explain away. I think like as a believer who like is an artist, I want to see other Christians just feel so free to like make good art. And if we go back far enough, like the church was the original like patron of the arts and created the best art in the world. You know, you look at Michelangelo, you look at you go far back enough, and they were kind of the leaders in the art world, and it wasn't weird. It was amazing. And I feel like nowadays, especially like in the church and Christian circles, like art is not something that is strongly advocated for. And so I think I'm really just like, hoping and praying for more Christians to make good art just that they care about, and let that be their witness to the world, is that we know the Creator, and I feel like that's something that we can share and like give and express. So that's something that I'm looking forward to in the future. And then I think just practically, something I'm hoping for is that for like our culture to shift for like brands and businesses and like industries and the commercial world, small business owners to value the work of the individual artist. And I think I'm starting to see some of this. I was talking to a friend, I know a couple people that have gotten like collaborations with Target, and Target is so good at like calling out an individual illustrator and being like, hey, we want this, can you design this for a line of things? And that's a ginormous corporation that maybe shouldn't or doesn't have to like care about the individual artist, but they do, and it's actually why Target has some like amazing stuff. And so I'm hoping that more businesses will get on board with the storytelling ability of the individual artist, because there's a lot that they can offer to each other, and the future of marketing and sales, I think, is going to have to all be art and storytelling and personal.
Yeah, I think so too.
I know you think so.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It's happening.
Big brands watching this, please hire us to make good art.
I know. Yeah, no, you're so right.
Yeah.
And where can, if the big brand is watching and wants to hire you, how? How can they reach out?
Well, first they should reach out to Tosin for a brand design, because they probably need it, let's be honest. They can find me online. I have a website. It's just ElizabethJoySanders.com. Same thing with my Instagram. That's pretty much it.
Awesome.
Find me, follow me, send me messages.
Yes.
Go through my funnel on my homepage. Sucked into the algorithm.
Yes.
Weekly newsletter, which I don't really write. That's something I gotta work on that. People can sign up for that. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll link it all. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and being vulnerable and generous with your time and your knowledge and just who you are.
Thank you for having me. All joy.
Okay, cool. We are complete. Not too scary, I hope. A little scary.
Imposter.